an unpopular opinion, a personal one at that, but I'll share it regardless. As a continental African who has taken the time to educate herself on the topic of slave trade that happened, especially in the west coast of Africa centuries ago, I strongly hold the opinion that continental Africans should pay reparations to descendants of enslaved Africans who now live in the Caribbean, in the Americas, and in Europe. Because the slave trade that happened on the continent was a transaction between the Europeans and the Africans who participated in that atrocious trade. Now, when you visit the sites that now stand as relics of this slave trade, you will see just how inhumane, how horrendous slave trade was. So I wonder why, when calls for reparations and apologies for these horrendous acts are made, they are usually targeted at the Europeans who participated in the trade that was between them and Africans. I understand the sentiments, but like I said, as a continental Africa, I've visited quite some sites. I've been to Ghana, I've seen the Osu slave castle, I've seen the slave trade relics at Badagry, which I'm talking about in this video. I can say authoritatively and audaciously that continental Africans are just as complicit and should be made to pay reparations for slave trade that happened. I took a trip to Badagry. Badagry being a local government and a town in Lagos State, Nigeria, West Africa. There I paid a visit to two of the slave trade relics, and these relics belong to two prominent families, the Mobi family and the Sarikin Abbas family. These are two prominent families that participated in the slave trade that happened in that region.
The slave trade started here in Badagry 15 centuries ago. So the trade lasted for good 400 years before it was abolished. And during the olden days, all this environment used as a slave corridor, slave was brought from outside Badagry, from interland, like Oyo, Oshogbo, Abeokuta, Ibadan, Ondo, different places like that. During the days of slave trade, we have two coasts. We have slave market in Calabar. The name of the market called Young Slave Market, established in the year 1810. So in each market day in Calabar, 100 slaves were being sold in a day. So now here in Badagry, we have Blekete Slave Market, established in the year 1502. In each market day here in Badagry, 300 slaves were being sold in a day.
When you come to Badagry in Lagos, Nigeria, there's a lot of history here, colonial history, slave trade history, and just the history of the people. So being in Badagry, I want to come see for myself the relics of the slave trade that happened in this area in Nigeria. This was a major slave trade hub in Nigeria. Slaves were captured here, sold here, and transported via that body of water that is part of the Atlantic Ocean to lands unknown. So we are going to have a look at some of the relics here and just take in the history. Okay, it's important to learn from our history to avoid a repeat. So welcome, I'm the African storyteller. If you're coming by for the first time, you're welcome. If you've not subscribed, click on that subscribe button. When you do, tap on the bell and select all. That way you will always be the first to know when I post a new video or I do a live stream. And yeah, for those of you returning my red loves, thank you for coming back. Share this video, okay? Let's go. Trust me to always give you the best of education, information, and entertainment.
Welcome to Badagry, the historical and ancient town in the whole Nigeria. So once again, I welcome you to Mobi Family Slave Relics Museum in Badagry. Badagry was founded 1425. That is when Badagry was established, and the slave trade started here in Badagry 15 centuries ago. So the trade lasted for good 400 years before it was abolished. So at my right side here we have the grave of the chief controlled Badagry during the days of slave trade. His name Chief Sumbu Mobi. He died October 16, 1893. So during his own time, slavery stopped in Badagry 1886 after the trade lasted 400 years. So Chief Sumbu Mobi's father eventually participated during the days of slave trade. His one nickname Mobi by the white men, because whenever the white people came to buy slave, he always offered them with a kola nut. Spoke with them in Yoruba that Oremi Oyibo Emu Obije, means my white friends pick kola nut and eat. Why his own name is very difficult for the white people to pronounce, let's say calling him. They are
Mobi.
looking for Chief Mobi, so that's where the name Mobi derived from. So at my left side here we have the original chain used on our forefather during the days of slave trade. And these chains was brought here by the white men to here around 15 centuries ago, roughly 5 to 600 years now. This very chain that we are seeing here. And during the holding days, all this environment used as a slave corridor, slave was brought from outside Badagry, from interland,
Okay.
like Oyo, Oshogbo, Abeokuta, Ibadan, Ondo, different places like that. During the days of slave trade, we have two coasts. We have slave market in Calabar. The name of the market called Young Slave Market, established in the year 1810. So in each market day in Calabar, 100 slaves were being sold in a day. So now here in Badagry, we have Vlikete Slave Market, established in the year 1502. In each market here in Badagry, 300 slaves were being sold in a day. Okay. So any slave handed to the white men, they have these chains around the neck. So that water front there, which is the slave port, happened to be the largest slave port in West Africa. Okay. So any slave handed to the white men, they have these chains around the neck. You can come. You can come in. They have these chains around the neck like this. Jesus. And to be around the neck like this for good 18 hours every day. They use the many 6 hours to relax.
Having these chains around my neck is so painful. The chains are literally weighing me down, like pulling me down. Now imagine what pain those enslaved went through, wearing these chains on their neck for hours, months. Not only on their necks, their hands, their legs, they were shackled. Now I wonder, why? Why would man sit and conceive such a horrendous act and met it out on a fellow human being?
Sorry. Thank you. So after fixing these around the neck, this was fixed on, you can come, this was fixed on two people's leg, as in one person's leg here, another person. Then lock it to padlock.
Wow.
And two of them continue working, going at the same time at once. Let's try. You can see.
My goodness.
This used on stubborn slave who refuse to work on the farm. They have to force his hands by force.
This is so small. They force their hand.
Yeah, by force.
Well, my hand
Hurt
can
his
pass.
wrist. They now remove this screw, screw it up on a tall tree. Why his two legs will be dangling, punishment for the stubborn slave. This used on children to guide their children. Yeah, they do. They guide their children not to disturb their parents while working on sugarcane plantation. They have to join 2 or 3 kids' hands together like this. They lock down padlock while their parents busy working on the farm. So this use of mouth to prevent those slaves not to eat while working on sugarcane plantation, or for them not to talk to the one and now the while working on sugarcane plantation. So this is very, very horrible. So why this was used for 3 purposes. The first purpose is they put this object into a fire when it is very red hot. They used to pierce their lips like this.
Okay. They'll pass it through their
Both
lips.
up and down. Then I'll fix this. They draw the lips out very well. Yeah. They have to lock it with padlock like this and like that. If you guide them not to eat or to talk to the one and not while working on sugarcane plantation. The second purpose of using this object, slave. Slave has name. But those white people, they were so callous. They don't allow slave to bear the name. They bear the master's name. How did they do that? They have to put this object into a fire when it is very red hot. Mm-hmm. They use this to write the name of the masters at their body.
And write the master's name.
Yeah, and the master's nationality. So that when they go back to that, taking them to, they can be able to identify them.
So that was how they did away with their own identity right from here and gave them a new identity even before taking them away.
So the third purpose of using this, any slave trying to run away, in captured, they have to put his leg on top of the falling tree in the farm like this. And then nail it down. If you watch a movie called The Root, that is Kentakunte movie, or 12 Years in Slavery, you will know what I'm talking about. This is called cannon gun. The gun stand as time, shot 3 times in a day here in Badagry. The first shot of this cannon hearing in the morning here in Badagry signified that they were taking the slave down to the farm to work. Okay. Second one in the afternoon means they have been arrived from the farm down to where they normally kept them, called the Brazilian slave barracoon. That barracoon is a Brazilian word, means jail, cell, or prison. The third shot of this cannot signify a curfew, means everybody in this barracoon must remain indoor. Anybody caught after the third shooting have to face the consequences, mainly so out into slavery. Because during
The
the olden days,
consequence of being out after the curfew is
yeah,
they'll
yeah,
catch you and
yeah.
sell you to slavery.
Because during the days of slave trade, all this environment used as a slave corridor, slaves used to spend like 3 months within this environment before the white people shipped them away to the new world, to the places like Cuba, Jamaica, West Indies, Brazil, America, different places like that. So this is the money spent in those days. Cowries, or where you're in Yoruba, cowries in English. Cowries only recognized within ourselves in Africa as money by then. But the white people, they couldn't recognize this. In order for them to buy slave, they practice trade by barter. They have to bring things like gunpowder, iron, cotton, mirror, umbrella, whiskey in exchange of human being. So like then, a bottle of whiskey like this in exchange of 10 able men. 10 men.
One bottle,
Yeah.
but 10 able-bodied African men. Oh,
So this is where the slave have their drinking water, called the slave drinking water bowl. When the slave arrive from the farm, they fear water, they tie their hands back, open their mouth, lock with a heavy chains around the neck. Then ask them to bend down, they drink like animals.
nice.
In the process of drinking, they will push themselves, their head will hit this, blood will flow
And
inside the
mix
water.
inside the water.
They are still drinking. During the days of slave trade, we have two categories of slave. We have the freed slave and we also have the domestic slave. The white people settle down here in Madagascar while the business is going on, and they use some of the male slave at home, like a domestic slave. So in order for such slave to have sexual intercourse with their own wife or their daughter, they do castrate them.
To prevent them from having sex.
Yeah. So they do castrate them. That is to say, they do castrate some of the male slave during the era of slavery. This talks about resistance and public punishment, how the slave were being maltreated during the days of slave trade. Also, this talks about the marching to the coast, means marching to the point of no return. Here was called point of no return during the days of slave trade. But a lot of tourists do go here now and they return back home successfully. The slave market, finally established in the year 1502 here in Badagry, and the Middle Passage. This is how our brothers and our sisters in diaspora were being exported to the unknown destination. Why taking them away? When the captain of this ship discovered that the boat is too much loaded, they have to drop some for the lighter of the ship. So finally, this talks about separation of a family. Means this man be sold to this client, this woman be sold to this client. That family will never come across itself to the end of their life.
This is one of the family compound of the family that was involved in the slave trade at that time. So when you hear about slave trade, it might sound like myth or like stories, because of how horrible and everything it sounds, but it actually did happen. And monuments like this or relics like this attest to the fact that it did happen and should never have even happened in the first place. The slave barracoon where the slaves were kept. So we'll go inside and have a look. Brazilian barracoon.
And Braton means slave seller. Why it was called Brazilian Braton is because most of the slavery laid out of this compound through this slave port across the lagoon called Lagos Novo Lagoon, down to point of no return. Down to point of no return. They are being taken to Brazil. Most of them have been taken to Brazil, while others have been taken to Europe. But the man you are seeing in the picture happened to be the rightful owner of this compound. His birth name is Farem Lepo. This man, at a very tender age of 6, was captured and sold into slavery. Because they doesn't have to bear their master's name. So this man has to bear master's name. The first master who bought this man is called Abbas. Abbas lived in Dahomey, Benin Republic. In those days, it was called Dahomey before later changed to Benin Republic. Now, it was there and taken as domestic slave. He was there as domestic slave, and that gave the opportunity to Mr. Williams, who used to come all the way from Brazil in the purpose of buying slaves from Africa. He always saw this gentle boy with his master, Mr. Abbas, and he demanded to buy him from Mr. Abbas. And Mr. Abbas now resold him to Mr. Williams. That means his name now changed to Williams Abbas. After many years he have lived with Mr. Abbas called him one day, Mr. Man, come, I want to give you your freedom, but on one condition. He now told Mr. Abbas that you are my master. Whatever you wish, you can do. So he said, I will send you back to your country. You'll be doing the running rounds I'm supposed to do, going from interland to interland, from village to village, from town to town in search of slaves. You'll be doing that for me. He accepted the offer and he sent him back to Nigeria. He first based in Lagos Island before he acquired this land and built this compound of 40 slave cells. In 1840s, they kept 40 slaves in each of the cells, and that gave us the total number of slaves kept in this compound to be 1,600 slaves that lived the shore of this country through this slave port across this lagoon called Lagos Port Novo Lagoon down to point of no return. And because of the kind of currency we use in those days that doesn't have value in international market, that is why the European masters, they came about what we call trade by barter. You know, the slaves, they are goods to their masters. Do you know the value of one umbrella? The value for one umbrella is 40 slaves, 40 human beings. Everyone, strong men and women, 40 for one umbrella. A bottle of gin or a wine is for 10 slaves each. The long cannon gun is for 100 slaves, while the short one is for 40 slaves. The mirror and the bead depend on how you bargain. While the ceramic bowl is for 10 slaves, while dengon is for 40 slaves. So, this is the light umbrella. Don't touch the cloth. This is the umbrella you can touch here for 40 women beings. You can lift it up. We'll try. Clap for yourself. You try. So this is the umbrella for 40 women beings. And one umbrella. Yes, 40 women beings. And this one is called ankle shackle, meant for two people's leg at a go. Ankle shackle. One leg of one man and one leg of the other person. And they carried this for good 18 hours on the plantation. And these are some of the equipment used for slave trade mission. And look at them. Look at the way they line them up going to point of no return. In the neck, chain, hand, chain, leg, chain. So, and all these are for slave trade mission as well. The first room is called inspection room, while the inner room, inspection room, yes. And the inner room is the main cell, which I told you that they kept 40 slaves, 40 men were kept in this place. Let's go. Look at the small window. The size is 9 by 9 feet room. Very small indeed. So now you have to imagine, are they going to sit down, stand up, or sleep, or lie down? 40 people must be here. And inside the female cell, they kept both all the women. The one that is breastfeeding, the one that is pregnant, the one that doesn't pregnant, we kept them together with their children inside one set to make it 40. And these are the ceramic bowl. Ceramic bowl for 10 slaves, yes. In exchange of slave, 10 slave. This is the court of Chief Seriki Williams Abbas, where he passes judgment to any disloyal slave. The one they want to hang, the one they want to behead, the one they want to kill directly. This is where he will pass the judgment, and that is his chamber. And sometimes they use it as meeting palace for councils of Abbas. And here they buried Seriki himself. He died June 11, 1919.
When you reflect on this history, you can't help but see the extent of man's inhumanity and wickedness to another man. You would say, well, it wasn't, it was a forced trade. Yeah, maybe to some extent it was a forced trade. But let's not forget that before the Europeans came, slave trade was already being practiced on the continent by Africans who would go to war, fight with other kingdoms, other people, and overpower them, capture some of them as slaves and bring them back to their domains and use them as domestic slaves, as slaves working on their plantations. This was a bid to amass wealth, to demonstrate superiority, power, and amass wealth for themselves at the expense of other people's freedom, joy, and liberty. Now, when the Europeans came and saw that this was already on ground, it was an easy passage for them, participated in it, and took it to the next level, meting out those atrocious, horrendous acts to the enslaved Africans who were taken away to work on plantations. And yes, by no means am I excusing the Europeans from paying reparations to descendants of the enslaved in the Caribbean, in the Americas, and in Europe, because what we have as the empires in the European and Western world today were largely built on the sweat of the enslaved Africans. So, of course, they should pay reparations. But the question is, why do we often excuse continental Africans from the cause for reparations? Like I said, I'm a continental African, but having seen the sites and relics of these acts in history, continental Africans should not be excused from the call for reparations and genuine apologies. And we might think that this is history, but history is bound to repeat itself if we do not learn from our past. Because even today, we have people in society who want to exert power and amass wealth for themselves at the expense of other people. It might not be as glaring as it was in the case of slave trade, but it is happening. And if we do not call ourselves to consciousness and remind ourselves of our history past, then it might repeat. I strongly believe that, if it is not already repeating itself. I've seen several countless videos on this slave trade history, but I've not seen a continental African who is audacious enough to call out the truth as it is and demand that even continental Africans should pay reparations and apologize sincerely to the descendants of the enslaved who now live in the Caribbean, in the Americas, and in Europe. So, let's take this conversation further and let's genuine, tangible actions come out from it at the end of the day. Okay, thank you so much for watching. I'm the African Storyteller. I'll see you in the next video. Until then, stay safe, healthy, be law abiding. Bye.